Okay, so welcome everyone on behalf of the American Benevolent Society. It is fantastic to have all of you here. We are so pleased to welcome our two speakers today who will speak on a variety of topics, mainly focusing on what we may expect from the new Biden-Harris administration and how those policies may affect Americans living in Mexico. We have two speakers today, Ms. Michele Manatt and Dr. Heidi Jane Smith. Michele Manatt is a Democratic strategist and former State Department official. She has served as a senior policy advisor to 3 assistant secretaries of state for the Western Hemisphere affairs in the Clinton-Gore administration. Her responsibilities included public diplomacy, business community, women's advancement, and congressional relationships. Her community engagements include serving as a member of the Community Council of WAMU 88.5, which is the flagship national public radio station for the National Capital Region. She earned her bachelor's degree in political economy of industrial societies from the University of California in Berkeley. While in college, she spent the summer at the Universidad Iberoamericana here in Mexico City. And from 2018 to 2020, she was the president of the James Renwick Alliance, a nonprofit that promotes and advances American craft art and is closely aligned with the Smithsonian American Art Museum. I'm sorry, I think I may have a mistake that she lives outside Washington, but I believe you told us that you live in Mexico City. I apologize, Michele.
No, I live just outside of DC. I live in Virginia.
Sorry.
Depends on the audience. It depends on who I'm talking to.
Okay,
I live in Virginia. I don't have the pleasure of living in Mexico City. Unfortunately, I got confused. Heidi and a lot of folks for a long time.
I'm sorry, to make it simple. Mistake.
No problem.
And Dr. Heidi Jane Smith is a professor of economics at the department at the a professor in the economics department at the Universidad Iberoamericana here in Mexico City. She has extensive work experience with Latin American governments and included as an academic at the Universidad Iberoamericana, ITAM, CIDE, FIU, and GMU, and as a consultant for the World Bank, the IDB, OAS, OECD, and serving in the US government, working both at the US Department of State's Economic Policy Office for the Western Hemisphere Affairs from 2009 to 2012, and at the Inter-American Foundation from 2001 to 2007. She was the recipient of the Fulbright Garcia Robles Fellowship in Mexico in 2010 and worked at CIDE. She has taught research methods, political economy, public policy at the ITAM and Ibero in Mexico City, and at George Mason University in DC and Florida International University in Miami, Florida. Dr. Smith's research focuses on expanding capital markets, comparative public finance, and subnational debt, local policy decision-making, and the concept of social equity in developing countries, in particular Mexico and Argentina, and also Korea and China. She has presented her analytical perspective on the BBC, Fox News, Bloomberg Financiera, among other radio and television stations, and in print for the National Public Radio, Aristegui, and Reforma. Dr. Smith holds a PhD in public affairs from Florida International University in Miami, and a master's in public policy from American University in Washington, DC, and a BA in political science, Spanish and Latin America from the University of Wisconsin in Madison. And Dr. Smith does live in Mexico City. I apologize for my confusion. And I am so happy and pleased to welcome both of you. And we're very much looking forward to your talk. If you have any questions, please put them on the chat, send them. Mario and I will be checking them. And Heidi and Michele, we will all mute ourselves and the floor is yours. Thank you and welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much to Aliki and to Mario for making this possible and for the invitation. So let me add just one thing about me and relevance to the moment we find ourselves in, and that is that I was part of a team of volunteer advisors who helped the Biden-Harris campaign on foreign policy. And in my case, I worked with about 85 other colleagues on the connection between US Latin America policy and the domestic political situation and here in the United States. So I don't always put that in my bio. It depends on the audience that I'm speaking to or joining. But I was very involved over the past year in the campaign as an outside expert advisor. So this week we saw the culmination of an extraordinary process, an extraordinary convulsion, and an extraordinary path in this country on Wednesday, when, thank goodness, we had a peaceful transition of power. We had all branches of our government in one place at one time, and a lot of history was made. It was made against the backdrop of what the world was really paying attention to, which was the militarization that was necessary to bring into DC since the events of January the 6th. I was able to go up to the Hill 2 days before that and see for myself what it meant to have National Guard here. And it was terrifying, but I understood it was necessary. So on exactly as should have happened, on the 20th of January, just before noon, Joe Biden became our 46th president, but really importantly, history was made. We have the first ever female nationally elected leader. And that has lost a little bit of, I think, the emotion of it and the urgency and the importance of it for the body politic because of everything else that's going on. So I think over time, that's going to bubble up again. But we have a remarkable person who is now our vice president, who's from a state that has a lot of ties with and a lot of future with Mexico. So I think that's something to build on. During the inauguration ceremonies itself, we saw what is the potential for working together among the two and with the two parties. Leadership was there from all the leaders who needed to be there from both parties were present in the same space at the same time. So that was really very, very good. And the Biden inaugural committee, which is kind of an outgrowth of the campaign, made every effort, I think, possible to have a very inclusive expression of what they want to have happen, what they want to unleash in this country through the choices that were made about the benediction, who was there to sing which songs. Garth Brooks came in kind of somewhat unexpectedly and sang off, did not sing what you would expect him to sing. He left his cowboy hat to the side. He just kind of wanted to be part of it, but the genius was the olive branch that he offers culturally to other people throughout this country. And that was really very, very positive. So lots of elements to build upon. Of course, the centerpiece of the inauguration was the swearing in oath and then the speech that now President Biden gave. It was very significant that Sonia Sotomayor administered the oath to Kamala Harris. And I think it hit people when they were watching it happen. If you go back and look at their faces and their reaction, I think it really hit them. But then the speech that Joe Biden gave was very much a speech that represents him and infiltrated, impacted by the sobering moment that we find ourselves in. So it was more than just a collection of his intentions. It was really what he wants to imprint on this country as a means of getting us out of where we are right now. And the rest of the day unfolded, in a very positive way for those who were paying attention. Fortunately, there really wasn't the violence or unrest around the country that was feared. That was very, very welcome and necessary after everything that happened on January 6th. And I guess enough time passed between the 6th and the 20th for things to for people to recede to their corners, is the way I would put it, to be charitable. But the thing that is really remarkable about the rest of the day on Wednesday is how Joe Biden came in and got right to work. He didn't waste any time at all. Executive orders were ready to roll. And before it was 8 o'clock on the West Coast, those were signed. And those executive orders get to that is absolutely front and center, the most critical priorities that we are facing right now. And those begin, of course, with COVID and the COVID response. So over the next number of days, we are going to see kind of a progressive march of the issues and the actions that can be taken both by pure executive order and new legislation that can be proposed. We're going to continue to see that roll out. But those 17 executive orders, I'm sure you all saw it, the stack of documents on the Resolute desk ready for him to sign. That was meant to make just one clear statement, which is we're here to work. We're here to get the people's business going. And it was really the outgrowth of 2 solid months of work by the transition team, which was hampered in many ways, as you have heard. So the other very important thing that happened on the first day is progress was kicked off on his cabinet nominations and the process for confirming them. And by nighttime on Wednesday, we already had one member of the cabinet confirmed, the new head of the new director of national intelligence, Avril Haines. Interesting. It is somewhat coincidental, but interesting that a woman is the very first person to be confirmed in the Biden cabinet. So that's a good thing. The critical environment in which this entire government is coming into office, coming into power, is staggering. It's nothing that we've ever seen in the lifetimes of anybody gathered on this Zoom or anyone who will watch this program later. To have a pandemic that's been raging for a year, that's been punishing the country and has taken up to over 400,000 American lives in territorial United States already, the consequential economic impact that it has had that basically continues unabated. The racial justice strife and racial reckoning that is hanging over all of this country now without a clear path about what's to be done, what kind of measures can reasonably and tangibly be achieved in the near future. And the climate crisis which affects us domestically, threatens a number of states along the coast of places like Florida, places like the Mid-Atlantic. The climate crisis is something we've known about since Al Gore was in the Senate. Think about how long ago that was the case. And then the last I would mention is the immigration crisis, which is unfinished business at its core. So Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, Ron Klain, who is the new chief of staff, and the entire team are waking up every day, showing up at their place of work, wherever that is physically right now, with these things on their mind and with these bearing down on them. So it's just a very sobering, staggering situation that we find ourselves in. And we're seeing that reflected in the media, the way the media is covering it, the way the media is dedicating resources, airtime, bandwidth to it, which is good. You've had a lot of editorial opinion come out immediately about the executive orders, which is important. In many ways, the media has not been caught off guard. This has all been teed up for them. So it's really, really very important. The other thing that has happened here, of course, is there's a new Congress. The new Congress was a huge part of the fight electorally over the past year. So not all that Democrats were hoping for, let there be no mistake about that. But with the 2 runoff elections in Georgia in early January, we do have working control. Democrats have working control of the Senate. So that's a very positive thing as well. It could have gone the other way. And on the same day, on Wednesday, those new senators were sworn in by the vice president. It was also a precious moment. Didn't get enough attention, I think, in the media, but it will continue to be told as part of the story. Very significantly for the relationship between the United States and Mexico, there is now the first ever Latino who will be serving as senator from California. So Alex Padilla is someone to get to know, to follow, pay attention to this gentleman. It's going to be important to see how he rolls out, what committee assignments he secures for himself, what priorities he starts to work on right away, and his working relationships with other colleague senators. of both parties. Very, very important. Let me turn to what's happened in terms of the immigration executive order, which is top of mind, I think, for anybody who's managing and monitoring and cares a lot about the bilateral relationship. So really, without being aggressive rhetorically about it, the Biden government, the Biden administration has gone right at the heart of saying what Trump was doing, we're not doing anymore. It's over. So suspending construction on the border wall. He is pulling back from that. There are ways that you have to analyze what the like contracts and what the financials and what the technical aspects of the wall are. But for now, the construction is halted, and there will be a period of about 3 months looking at it, trying to assess what makes the most sense, what will harm the US government the least, and what to do with what's there. More than one session could be held on the extraordinary Alice in the through the looking glass experience of the Trump and the border wall. In addition to that, he went right at DACA, which has been an important achievement, a solution, a short-term solution proposed by and carried out by the Obama administration, but DACA that became an incredible political target between the parties. So he's bolstered DACA among his very first acts. And in addition, ended the Muslim ban, which is one of the most painful and ugly and Trump illustrative things that he did in the first days of his government exactly 4 years ago. Another very important thing that was announced actually before Wednesday is that the National Security Council, which has great proximity to the president physically and of course in terms of policy, there will be a new position there, which will effectively be a coordinator for the border. And named to that position is Ambassador Roberta Jacobson. So I know she's known to everyone joining us here and listening to this later. This is extraordinarily good news because she is the professional's professional. She knows exactly what's going on, what the tools are, what the resources are, and I think what the politics are. That will be something to watch very carefully as a matter of progress, as a matter of indication of how the solutions are going to go forward. It's a very difficult job, no question about it. But I think that having someone, if you can think of it, it's really a civilian in that role. She has the incredible breadth of experience, but she's not coming at it from a law enforcement position per se or military ranking. She's a civilian. So I think that, and she's a mother. And I think all of those are going to play into things very, very positively. The other important announcement that has happened this week is that comprehensive immigration legislation has been introduced in both houses, and that there are identified ball carriers, champions for that in both chambers. So that is exactly meeting a promise that was made throughout the campaign. It shows the political courage, the political capital that Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, and all those supporting them are willing to commit early on to what has been a fraught issue. It remains to be seen. That is a nice way of saying I'm not sure that we are yet sensing enough positive reception to that on the Republican side, which is very, very worrying. But it's a new Senate, it's a new Congress. There's a bit of a reset that's already happened. So we have to remain optimistic that once the details of it are shared with members and senators, and when they can chomp down on it, understand it better, and then when hearings happen, when the legislative process proceeds, they will take the time to better understand it and be open-minded, at least, about it. When it comes to specifics of who's going to be involved in that, of course, it's the Judiciary Committee and the Homeland Security Committees that will be the lead actors in both chambers. Really good news is that Senator Bob Menendez of New Jersey, who is a very experienced legislator and has served in both bodies, he's going to be carrying the legislation in the Senate. This is a man who has very positive, constructive relationships with members of both parties. He's trusted. He's above all a legislator's legislator. And so I think that's really very, very good news. Of course, the Congressional Hispanic Caucus has a very important role, and so do a lot of others. But this is one of the biggest things to come out of the block very early. So it's commitment, it's delivery on promise. Hard to say how long it's going to take. I wouldn't want to put any kind of a deadline or an expectation of when exactly to see movement on it. But that's the way the legislative process works, and it's always at the disposal. It's up to them to move things along. We can't tell them what to do. We can only hope and lay at their disposal resources and support. The other important kind of contextual issue for how legislation is going to advance and how cabinet nominations are going to be able to proceed is the backdrop of the article of impeachment that was passed a week ago that now is hanging fire, if you will. It's something that is awaited by the Senate, and a lot of speculation as to what that is going to mean in terms of the process and the functionality, like the workload in the Senate. So truthfully, I think that they know and they want to be able to demonstrate in the Senate that they can walk and chew gum, that they can do two things at once. I don't think that there's an overwhelming limiting factor in terms of being able to get a lot of work done in any business day. They can split the working day. And I do think that once the article of impeachment is delivered there, which it now looks like it might be as early as Monday, that they will be able to do both the work that requires in terms of carrying out the impeachment trial and continuing with nominations. So I really want to dissuade or kind of put that in its place, rightful place, this idea that they can't do two things at once. They absolutely can. But what is now, as every day goes by, happening as well, which is worrisome, is the whisper campaign and kind of negative energies being directed towards senators and members who stood up and really weren't going to tolerate the actions of January the 6th, those who believed that objecting to the certification of the electoral results was a mistake. And that's really led, interestingly, by Elizabeth Cheney, a daughter of former Vice President Dick Cheney and a member from Wyoming now, and an important part of House leadership. There are a lot of indications that people are going after her. So it's dicey. It's even in this effectively the third week of this new Congress, it's uncertain. So a lot, it's shifting day by day. I think that it really is a test. It is in every sense a test of what these members believe is their oath of office and what they want to see happen for the country. There certainly is a wellspring of calls for the right thing to happen, which is simply follow the Constitution and follow your obligations. And I think quietly they know that, and they're continuing to do that. But there are a few outliers, particularly Ted Cruz, unfortunately, from the state of Texas, and Josh Hawley from Missouri, who are gumming it up, who are making it hard for others. The leaders of the Senate, so these are men who've worked together for a very, very long time, McConnell and Schumer. They are doing a lot behind the scenes that we're not hearing about. So that's a good thing. We will just have to stay tuned. I don't have a crystal ball on exactly what's going to happen there, but I do know that every senator and member, those who were just reelected or those who will face reelection in 2022, have to prove that they can get their job done. And part of that is moving ahead on cabinet nominations, on things that need to be reviewed, accepting and planning for new legislation. So on that, I'm very, very hopeful. And the entire, spirit and intention of what happened during the inaugural ceremonies on Wednesday was to look for opportunities to work more closely together. And I think that we're seeing support from that, even from classic conservative media, such as the Wall Street Journal, which is influential, not in the ways that it was 25 years ago necessarily, but is looking out for the needs and the integrity and the future of the US economy and US institutions. So that's all a very good thing. I think I'm going to stop there and toss it over to Heidi.
Thank you. And thank you, Akila and Mario, for the invitation. I love listening to Michelle. I always learn something new when I listen to her. And so I hope to complement what she said. What I'd like to do is describe the economic relief package that's coming out, the plan that Biden has set forth. What that means for the economy, what it means for the Mexican economy as well, since we're in such a nosedive. And then talk a little bit about the possibilities of what the dialogue and debate's going to be going through process of approving the legislation, and then also the possibility, what's going to happen, and any kind of dissent that it could exist with the economic proposals that are being set forth. So we've all heard the $1.9 trillion. This is the largest economic plan that any government has in the United States has instituted. This is also one of the worst economies that has ever been received by a democratic government coming into power, right? So there's a lot to tackle with this, and we're also in a very important crucial moment in history in terms of job loss and economic development. But it's an interesting time. So there's 5 key areas where I see that the relief plan focuses on. First is unemployment insurance. And I think you're going to see the supplemental programs of subsidies from the federal government to state governments to provide additional money to individuals in unemployed situations. You're going to see the proposal is additional checks, right? This whole debate that we had last fall, before the new year, was $600 versus $2,000 and how that was going to interact, right? So the compromise in the proposal is $600 that Trump has already instituted. I know I received my check signed by Trump for the $600 of relief funding already, and the proposal by Biden is $1,400 of individual relief money going out. Hopefully he won't personally sign the checks like we had the previous president do, but it'll be a distribution directly to each citizen, American citizen. Economic relief form is also in the form of investments. The idea is funding should go into building back better. Policy is funding infrastructure, working on clean energy policies and programs, and finding clean energy jobs, and then focusing on the healthcare system. The fourth major area is the raise of the minimum wage to $15. This is very polemic, right? A lot of people can't pay the $15. This is going to have serious conflict with Mexico, with its disparities of income inequality that exists. If you're going to increase the U.S. minimum wage, it's going to also have effect on Mexican workers. And then the fifth is what Michelle highlighted in the immigration laws. So let's talk about what this means. So 140,000 job loss in December. We had our job loss numbers come out yesterday, 900,000. Today, it was this morning. It's usually Friday mornings. 900,000 job loss. This is an extraordinary amount of job loss in these fragile times. We're in the peak of the pandemic. They expect the 400,000 lives lost is going to go to 500,000 before the summer. So we were in a very sad, I think the what was it, Tuesday night vigil that was at the memorial was very appropriate and very beautiful to watch. If everyone was able to see the Amazing Grace being sung, it was beautiful and very appropriate. So there's an extreme amount of hardship that's happening in the United States. The question then remains is how does the Congress create and approve such a large financial package? There is going to be questions about the possibility of the approval. The basis of this obviously is the rollout of COVID funding. The news has highlighted this idea that there's no plan, that plan doesn't exist under the Trump administration and Biden basically had to come in and create a plan. Well, I think that's a little eccentric, but in reality, the Trump plan was a very federalist, state, local oriented discussion. And so therefore it was very difficult to understand what that was, because it was really dependent upon how effective your local government was to procure vaccines, create a proper program. So I think the Defense Act that Biden has instituted today, so there was the 17 executive orders on, what was it, Wednesday, and then Thursday there was another 10. So yesterday was COVID in terms of his executive orders. And that's important because the idea is to concentrate the authority and power and plan of executing COVID relief, procuring more, not just vaccines, but also PPEs for those that have to administer the vaccine, and ensuring safety of those peoples. And the idea also is to educate them to do so. This plan with the 1.9 trillion would potentially mean Biden is paying $300 billion per month through each month of 2021. That's an extraordinary amount of money for executing this plan. And I think that the general debate and the tone is really a question of how much debt do we want to get into, right? So we're going into more macroeconomic decision making of how effective. Well, we're concerned about saving today in individuals, but we also have to think about what this economic plan means in the future. So the U.S. now is at a 106% of GDP debt. Growth rate in growth. Well, there was no growth last year. It was the negative 6.3. The International Monetary Fund expects 2021 to have a 3.5 growth rate, which is pretty extraordinary. And I think they just adjusted it to a 4.3, which would be even more extraordinary. So what does that mean for Mexico? Our 2020, we had a negative 9% digression in our growth. We've been in a depression here in Mexico, but with U.S. growth set so high, Mexico, by the International Monetary Fund, would project to 3.7 for Mexico. So it could have extraordinary impacts on the Mexican economy if we were to grow in that regard, which is really amazing. So what do economists? Larry Summers came out pretty strongly against such a big rescue plan. As everyone knows, Larry Summers was part of Clinton's Economic Council and now is in Harvard. He says there's three things that we should be concerned about, but chief among them is inflation that could potentially be created because we're circulating more money into our economy. Where is that money going to go, right? So he questions three things. The first is that there might be a problem of that maybe these jobs are just temporarily lost and they're not lost forever, right? So maybe we're helping too much these individuals that maybe we'll be able to recover sooner, or maybe these numbers aren't as high as we think they are. For me, hearing 900,000 is astonishing, right? Think of those families and individuals that don't have jobs. But in an aggregate, will they be able to receive new jobs? Second is maybe we're doing too much stimulus, right? Maybe we're giving out too much funding. We also know that there's been an increase, depending on where you are, you have a lot of secure people in their homes aggregating their savings rates because they're not spending what they used to spend when they were running around the economy, going on trips, going to restaurants, and they're staying much more at home. So you're actually potentially seeing not much of an effect. Maybe we don't need to give that money out to individuals. And then just the monetary strategy of the Fed and what Janet Yellen represents and the idea of fueling the economy. So I think whether you agree or don't agree with these concepts, I think this is going to be circulating the debate of some more macro indicators of the stimulus itself and where there might be opposition. I think Key players to look at in the Senate are these, and who has the power in the Senate. Remember, we have in the House of Representatives, we have 22 Democrats and 212 Republicans. So really in a marginal, Democrats are in a majority, but it's very close, right? And then obviously the Senate is 50-50 at this point, and with Kamala Harris making any kind of tie vote. But at the same time, right, you will see a lot of players that are on the, like what Michele said with Liz Cheney, but you're going to see more these moderate players as being much more important for making key decision making, because they are going to be negotiating the stimulus packages and all additional packages that are being sent to the Senate. So you're going to see much more empowerment of those moderate players. And I think the other thing that I would like to highlight is the extreme power play of Trump followers is going to need to be modernized. The freedom fighters, the Freedom Caucus, these kind of players, they're going to be much less, they're going to be marginalized, and you're going to see much more of a play by Ted Cruz's of trying to accumulate the base or manage the base that Trump has created, but without allowing him to be a potential 2024 candidate. So I think there's going to be a lot of debate between how to minimize the role of Trump, but maintain his political base for future. So that's going to be a lot of discussion. I'd love to open the discussion here and hear questions from the audience.
Let me just say one other thing about that, the Trump inheritance and that Trump leaves behind, which is, we're still trying to understand it in many ways. But there are two people in particular who were part of his cabinet who fancy themselves as, the highly likely contestants, those who will be aspirants for the presidency in 2024. And those are Nikki Haley, the former governor of South Carolina, which is a very important state over the past year and will continue to be, who was the UN ambassador, but who was only in that job, I think, about a year and a half. And Mike Pompeo, who was the former Secretary of State, who scorched the earth like no other Secretary of State we've ever seen. Their language was used about him in his last weeks that just is breathtaking and accurate. The two of them are going to be fighting it out for who can pick up the mantle from and who can make sense of and recompose the Trump base. So interesting that they both had very important, the most important diplomatic postings. We'll see where all that takes us.
Thank you, both of you, Heidi, Michele. This has been great. If you have any questions, please put them on their chat or go ahead and unmute yourself. We have one here, obviously thanking you for your presentations, both of you. And any thoughts on handling the profound fears on all sides, not ignoring fear?
Joe Biden's going to continue to speak about it day after day after day. I think we're going to see more events and more tools of communication come forth from those close to him, including from the First Lady. She is teed up to really be a strong, consistent presence as a First Lady. And some folks who have worked with some of us before on U.S. Latin America relations are right in there in her staff team. So that's really very positive. I think you're going to hear things from allies on Capitol Hill about the same thing. But, what's going on day to day in the country, like at the level of real life, I think many people are still recovering from the shock of it all. It was such a rough ending to the campaign. and to the election with, had to wait the number of days for it to be called as his victory. And then all of the uncertainty and the growing negative realities from COVID in November, and people not being able to gather for what is one of the most precious of all American holidays, Thanksgiving. And then just the continued assault from Trump. I mean, people are still in a PTSD state. So I think that a lot of folks are just looking for life to have order. And there are probably 3 indicators of that are the best measure. One is that we get a clearer, a predictable future for when people will be able to be vaccinated. The second is, when will schools be able to resume functioning operations for everyone who brings schools to life every single day? And the third is what's happening in terms of the government responding to the economic needs of the people. And, again, we're only 48 hours into this new government and actions are being taken. So those things just need to actually take effect. And with that, I think the temperature is going to go down.
Heidi, let me ask, sorry. Okay, go ahead.
I think what's so remarkable about Biden's inaugural address was that he called for unity and wants the country to be unified, but he's not ignorant in his analysis. We are in a democracy. We are going to accept opinions, and we want people to have opinions. I think fear Biden is going to be a very bold president.
Heidi, we lost you.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
So I think Biden's going to be the idea of being that politics is not the only thing that identifies us as Americans, but it's only a part of a public discussion, is going to be a fundamental that it's going to be in a boring presidency, and boring presidency is okay. We don't need politics front and center. We have to live our lives as well. In terms of the idea of a U.S. ambassador in Mexico, I'm interested to hear Michelle's opinion, but I think it's going to potentially be a career diplomat that might come in. I think that would be something that might happen within the Western Hemisphere.
Yeah, so I'm not going to speculate about that yet. I mean, it will be one way or the other. It'll either be a career officer or it'll be a great political appointee. I think both could be really, really good. It's going to be one of the most complicated diplomatic assignments. There are many, but it will be one of the most complicated this round. It could be either, and I really haven't heard reliable information to indicate one or the other. I mean, I think it's going to take quite some convincing, quite some persuasion to get someone to accept the position, frankly, because of also the counterpart in Mexico, right? Particularly, I mean, AMLO, who just, he's such an interesting puzzle. It's just, so it will be someone of extraordinary ability. And that person will be able to count on support from every single predecessor, including, I'm sure, Chris Landau, but more importantly, Roberta Jacobson and others. Chris Landau really wasn't there all that long, to be fair.
Let me circle back to Barbara's question to you specifically, Heidi. Barbara was speaking, about the fears, and you told a lot about the fears, what will happen in the U.S. side. How do you see those fears on the Mexican side? All of these families that are there, obviously, who have someone who is in the States illegally, or who has lived there, or all of these dreamers that had been deported back to Mexico. They live in fear as well. And I think Mexicans live in fear of the US. It has always been an important relationship, but I think Mexicans now also live in fear of the US. So how do you see that changing?
Hopefully with a lot of really good diplomatic efforts to identify the shared bond and ability to work together. I think this highlights the immigration debate and the necessity to get it right this time, right? This is right now, everyone's saying, well, they've done it before, they've tried to do it before, everyone says they're going to do it, but in reality, this is the moment we need to change the debate and make some serious decisions in our rulings. And I think that will affect not only Mexicans living in the United States, but also American or Mexican American families having family in the United States. And I know that fear exists, but I think with better education campaigns in terms of how different processes and procedures, my understanding is the immigration policy plan is in 3 areas. First, it's beefing up U.S. administrative courts. It's really been a bureaucratic failure on the United States for not having a sufficient amount of people to manage caseloads. Secondly, it's dealing with the border security. Right now, there's videos circulating in Mexico that Biden voted for the wall or didn't vote for the wall. Well, everyone knows there needs to be some sort of border security. That's an important element of national security, right? But it might be more IT focused, technological, as well as employment. Border security agents are very difficult to hire in the United States. It's not an easy job, right? And then the third is this idea of root causes. So we also need to hire more people and fund more programs in Central America. So we're eliminating the pressure that the Mexican government has for migrants coming from Central America. And this is a very difficult area of policy. It's not just throwing money at the problem, it's really working with individuals in communities to make sure that they feel safe in their own community so they don't have to leave. And I think that's an important part of combating fear. And also getting sufficient information about those who want to migrate and knowing their stories. There's a lot of cases that came out from ProPublica has a few stories of people that their names are crossed in the databases or that the information wasn't properly analyzed. And I think these are areas where the US bureaucracy also has to work better to identify people and why they're migrating and if they can help them.
Okay. Let me go back to minimum wage. We have a question here. With the expected minimum wage to increase to $15, what would be the financial impact expected? What would be the financial impact, and also what impact would it have the Mexican economy, considering that the remittances that are sent to Mexico are such an important part of the economy here? So you'll have the lower earners, what will happen in that situation? And also, if these wages increase even for the lower earners, do we expect more remittances to come to Mexico? And also, adding to that, how will it impact trade? This products obviously will be much more expensive, the cost of production in the US, and also how does it tie into the agreement with Mexico? Because that was one of the sticking points, was also increasing the wages in the Mexico side and our side. So how does all of that impact both the US and Mexico?
So I think just to start, Buy America is going to continue. And I think that although we went back to multilateralism, the US, going back to the WHO, going back to NATO, we went back to the Paris Accords. I think all these are very important. But at the same time, the call and yearning, I don't think we're going to go into neo-mercantilism of identifying only American, only Mexican, but there is a free trade agreement that exists, right? There is a tacit agreement with TMAC. TMAC is not a free trade agreement. I'm sorry, this is probably my personal, there's no free trade and free trade agreement there. It's a US-Mexico agreement. And that means that one of the things that Trump wanted to do was have the ability to leave at any time. Now, I'm not saying that we'll leave because the benefits are so great, but 13.9% of total value of taxes come from the US-Mexico tax collections. And then you have a Reforma reported on 488,000 million, which would was earned between January and November of 2020 for commercial engagement. So that the benefits that exist are extraordinary. But okay, so going back to, so there's a benefit, a mutual benefit, and the center of US-Mexico relations is going to continue and is one of our most interesting allied partners with the United States and Mexico. The largest embassy is next to, is here in Mexico City. You might see different players in the northern border that have economic interests with the United States and the northern and the southern states, which will make a difference. I think it's going to be up to the AMLO administration to deal with the discrepancies of the salary, and if we do pass $15 an hour. I don't know if that's a really viable solution, the $15 an hour. I know there's a lot of desire for that. What that would mean is pushing also income levels here in Mexico, right? But that would be up to the Ministry of Maria Luisa of Labor here in Mexico to deal with that. So I think you're going to see increased remittances because of the nature of the economy in the United States, and if they're earning more money, they'll definitely help their family. So I think that's definitely going to happen, Mario.
So let me just add to that. I do think, though, there'll be a lag because so many people are hurting so badly here. And, you know, so, and it'll take a little while for the minimum wage increase to take hold. I think there are, you know, there've been delayed purchases, delayed maintenance, delayed moving, all kinds of things. So it won't happen right away, but it should have a psychological effect immediately. Regrettably, I get a sense that we're going to have, it won't be long before we'll have the tussle back and forth with a lot of certain parts of the business sector fighting against the idea of a national, they're not going to like a national minimum wage. And the truth is he can't make a national minimum wage happen quickly. What he's hoping is that more states will proceed in that way. And a number of states did over the past year or couple of years, including here in Virginia, which a lot of people consider us a southern state. I really don't. We're kind of a split state. Half of we're mid-Atlantic. We're really not a southern state anymore. But only this year did minimum wage to $15 get passed because of the Democratic-controlled assembly. So I think we have to stay tuned. I mean, look, the federal government has certain policies and tools, and they're going after all the tools that they can. This is one of them. And so it makes every bit of sense that he uses the powers that he has. There will be something of a positive effect for Mexico, but alas, it won't happen as quickly as I'm sure all of us here on the Zoom would wish that it would.
Thank you. We have another question, and it asks, are you familiar with the Sao Paulo Agreement of far left Latin American countries? AMLO's government adheres to those agreements with the desire of turning Mexico into communist-like country. How do you see this trend playing out vis-a-vis the US-Mexico relation?
I think the good thing about Biden is it's not Trump, and so therefore he doesn't see us versus them. He actually, and this is very continuous of Obama's state when I was at the State Department under Hillary Clinton, and also Clinton, I'm sure, in the 90s, is using multilateralism, identifying players and working towards common interests, and not characterizing countries as specifics. I think one of the big things that's going to change is we're not looking at Venezuelan policy, Cuban policy like it was before, but we're looking more broadly at how the United States is going to engage in TPP. Mexico is already a member of TPP. So the idea that maybe the United States will use the knowledge that Mexico has earned by joining TPP so that we can also join TPP. So this is the kind of bilateral interests, multilateral engagement that the new State Department will focus on.
Yeah, it's very tricky. I mean, it's the good news is that the professionals are back, and there are no real surprises in terms of who one is working with throughout this region. And I hope that we can, separate ourselves somewhat from the labeling and the simplistic, taglines. Communism continues in a few countries on the planet, not, and massively, most significantly, of course, in China. But the eyes are wide open, and I think we're just going to move beyond the simplistic, throwaway lines talking about each other. And really, if you have the chance to listen to the Foreign Relations Committee a confirmation hearing for Tony Blinken, which was on Tuesday, it's available. Just look for it, cspan.org, other places. That is what really represents, the day-to-day yeoman's work, professional opinion of countries throughout the world, from Republicans and Democrats who have the responsibility to know what's going on. And it's, we're in a fierce fight for influence and position in the world. And, the big rival is China. And big question is, what can we do together with the other major powers? Really, one of the things that we've got to get on a better track is our ability to work also with Europe, with Europe's leadership. Separate topic for another time, but it's a multipolar world, and it will be for the foreseeable future. And we all, I think, know and accept that. U.S.-Brazil relations have long been complex. They were in a very different place when I was at the State Department than they are now. But I think in part, we're going to see more emphasis, not just on head of state to head of state and minister to minister relations. It's what do we have in common? What can we work on together? And for me, number one is COVID response. So I think that we can look for that to come up over the horizon quickly. And, there'll always be the people who want to talk about, well, they're populists, and so they won't really get along with Biden, or they're kind of they're going to irritate each other. I mean, Biden is going to look well beyond that. And Kamala Harris is getting a baptism in all of that, because she really was not deeply involved in foreign policy before being chosen to be the vice presidential pick and being part of that policy process through the campaign and the election itself.
Exactly. And let me ask you one more thing. In terms of invest community, how likely is it that the Biden administration will get involved in helping foreign and U.S. energy companies achieve a level playing field vis-a-vis Pemex here in Mexico? For example, getting the Mexican government to start issuing the permits to open gas stations, to the potential deterrent of AMLO's desire to protect Pemex's market share. We had seen a lot of openness in the previous administration here in Mexico, which completely disappeared with the AMLO government. Do you think that will be taken up by the Biden administration?
I'm going to defer to Heidi on that, but energy is, without any question, a top issue bilaterally. And people have been, pressing their worrying beads, their rosary, whatever you want to call it, for this whole period of time throughout the AMLO government, because this is not what this is, so in opposition to the progress or the forward movement that we'd seen on energy policy for a long time. It is, going to be an absolute top level issue from the get-go.
So I would highlight that this is where multilateralism is very, very effective and why it's important. Citing the Paris Accords, going back and cutting the Keystone Pipeline, saying that you can't drill in the Arctic. These are the plans for Kerry as a appointment for a cabinet level position for climate. I mean, this is a fundamental, very important change in how cabinet appointments have worked in the past. And I think that will be a way of dealing with energy policy. So it's not just going to be an issue of USTR dealing with contracts. Rather, it's going to be more specifically about what can Mexico do in their efforts to curb climate change. And so you see that in Mexico, to get to the goal of -2°C, right? That is our goal. What is Mexico going to do? And we know that in Mexico City, for example, everyone that's been here during the time this past few months, that we haven't had much transportation contamination, but we still have contamination in the air, and that's coming from refineries. So what I would expect is more civil society saying we'd like to have less contamination in the air. We'd like to work with the government to think about how to deal with those kinds of issues. So not necessarily, like just as Michele said, president to president or executive to executive, but we'd also like to see other areas of society to work towards goals that we have as global public policy. And global public policy means climate change, and returning to climate change is an important element, which might be a different way of dealing with things that were happening in the past.
I think in terms of the sort of analyzing and understanding the US-Mexico relationship as strategized and executed from the US Embassy, and of course remember that that is a chief of mission posting, which means he or she is responsible for overseeing the work of all agencies of the US government in the country. For years now, that has been much, much more than just head of state to head of state, foreign minister to foreign minister. And so I think that will only continue. I mean, based on what I'm aware of that Chris Landau did, how he spent time while he was there, he made a very serious point of traveling around the country. There are many different, leaders, squadron leaders in those who carry forth and are charged really practically with carrying out and guiding and shaping the US-Mexico relationship. So, I mean, I think AMLO puts us all in a very difficult position in some ways because he's so unconventional. He, just does it his way. He, traditions don't seem to matter. I mean, today, probably before the end of this day in Washington, President Biden and Prime Minister Trudeau will have their first official telcon. They're going to either do it by phone or by secure video. And that's always the way it starts for a new president. The first official contact he has is with counterpart in Mexico. That's not going to happen counterpart in Canada with Trudeau. That's not going to happen. We're not going to see the follow-on with Mexico unless there's been an announcement in the past few hours. I don't think
there has.
Yes, because he yesterday, the day before, said, "Oh, I don't need to talk to Biden." So maybe that's changed.
No, there was an announcement about an hour ago, just when we were starting, that Ebrard, a friend of mine from Relaciones Exteriores, Ebrard and his orchestrated a call with it'll basically be Jake Sullivan, who will be fielding the call in the U.S.
Oh, that's good. That's good. But those are like building blocks and optics. Really what matters is what comes after. And, civil society, business leadership, organizations like yours, important public intellectuals, universities, colleges, they need to be speaking out about all this. We need a different kind of bilateral relationship. We've got to focus on ways we work together, what we do to support one another. And COVID, and vaccine information, scientific sharing and cooperation, strategies and best practices for that. To me, that makes a lot of sense that we look to double down on that through the WHO, through PAHO, through the science advisor who's at the embassy there and their counterpart up here. This is what the people are looking for. The drama of what goes on, president to prime minister, really doesn't make a damn bit of difference in real people's lives. We need to get to people's nuts and bolts, what's going to mitigate their pain. And, it's no secret what we need to work on.
Do you think that with the announcement this morning from AMLO saying that they were going to open the ability to buy vaccines to the private sector, and to each state individually, they were going to be able to buy, do you think there'll be cooperation maybe with the private sector and the US government to facilitate those vaccines? And obviously it is in the best interest of both countries with sharing such a huge border that the entire population is protected, because I think it's probably one of the most traveled borders and most cross borders. So it behooves everyone to increase the vaccinated. So do you foresee a relationship between maybe US players and the private sector here in Mexico to vaccinate?
I would think so. I would absolutely think so, but I'm not read in on that up to this point. I don't know exactly what's been contemplated, but there is no more urgent issue. You know, we can talk about corruption, we can talk about transportation, we can talk about the quality of air. Those are issues that were a major thing long before today and will continue to be 6 months from now and 36 months from now. There's nothing more critical than COVID response. So yes, I think that we can look for it, but I don't have anything specific that I've been briefed on that I could share with you at this time.
And we have one last question, which is, what do you hear, and this is a sore subject, I'm sure, what do you hear about the US reaction to the exoneration of General Cienfuegos? I mean, it was
stunning. Stunning. And it would have gotten a lot more attention in the US if this other, mega drama of the closing weeks of the Trump administration hadn't been going on, and there hadn't been a refusal to accept electoral outcomes, and there hadn't been an assault on the Capitol. I think Bill Barr made some statements about it just before he left, but it's stunning. And it's also incredibly, disrespectful of the work of law enforcement in the United States, who worked that for a very long time. So it will be, it is not forgotten, it is not overlooked, but again, it's putting those who are going to be charged with managing the relationship starting now, and then once we have nominees for a couple of the key jobs, Assistant Secretary for the region at state, U.S. Ambassador to Mexico, it's going to be quite a load in their rucksack from the early days, but it's stunning. A lot more needs to be understood, and lessons need to be taken from it. But we've got to find ways to work together and cooperate. That is our charge. That is in the best interest of both of our countries. And the people are looking for us to move ahead.
I agree. Heidi, do you have anything?
I think that there was a moment between administrations that you had a lame duck president and a very difficult situation between the Department of Justice and the State Department, and these are different agencies. And the U.S. in the Mexican analysis of this is they don't understand the U.S. government and how it functions. So I do agree that it is kind of a stone and that's going to be having to be addressed. And at this point, there's so much speculation in Mexican media, it's just ridiculous. And that we don't know exactly how it's going to interact. But it is an important setting stone. But the idea is to have a prosperous new administration with good ideas that work unilaterally with shared interests and shared benefits for both communities. And I think that's what we want to think about moving forward, and that optimism that Michelle's highlighting. And I definitely have it. And I hope you do too after listening to the inauguration on Wednesday. That was so exciting.
So I'm wondering, how much was it watched there? Do you guys have a sense of that? Were people making a point? And of course, I would expect you and everybody connected to you was watching it. But what about, a bigger swath of Mexican society? Was it
I
a
believe
moment where people were paying attention and talking about it afterwards?
Yes, definitely.
Let me make a point. Ibero's Zoom, institutional Zoom crashed because everyone was watching the inauguration.
That's cool. That is a great, oh my God, that is such a great data point. You know, hear others of those, please share those. That is the kind of thing that is like evidence, hey baby, they are watching, they do care. It's worth all the investment that we put into getting people to pay attention. You guys may or may not be aware of what was done to, motivate and mobilize the American citizen community to vote in the election. So love that data point.
It was, and we have to tell you, we worked closely with a lot of groups here in Mexico and with the embassy in mobilizing voter registration from abroad. And it was fantastic. We had young people, we had voter registration going on at the American school with students, with teachers. A year ago in November, before all of this pandemic started, we even had Ambassador Landau at our booth at the American school when we were doing outreach for voter registration. So there is a lot of interest, not only from Americans in Mexico, but from Mexican youth. I think they have opened up, their eyes have been opened to their future and what they have to do and how things have changed and the way we communicate and the way we do things. So I think it was a great inauguration. It was a moment of unity that was so needed, not only for the states, but for everyone else in the world. I think seeing what happened as a Mexican point of view, that I spoke to a lot of people in Mexico, the disbelief and the shock that something could happen in the States where it is, the bedrock of democracy, where we think it's the most perfect union. To see that happening there, it just was a sense of awe that if that can happen there, what can happen in our countries?
Yeah.
So it was
a
good moment.
The very significant carryover issues that needs to be pulled apart and looked at, analyzed, and de-wonkified, or it needs to break out of its silo, is the disinformation campaign that really the ground for it was laid long before the election of 2020, but it is a humongous factor in how this country is going to be able to work together and break down the ugliness and the lack of respect and trust in one another, and in particular kind of a subset of the overall echo chamber that was created and really started with conservative radio in the 90s when Bill Clinton was president, and then got a major moonshot from Fox News becoming the cable network that it became, is Spanish language disinformation targeted at Spanish language natives. And what kind of a prism and an assessment that passes through, and what kind of responsibility there is for it. And I mean, it's something that keeps me up at night, because it's out there, it's found its way, it's seeped into the most direct device that's in everybody's lives now, which is their social media account, however they use social media. And this is a very serious new area of work. I have not seen or heard anything that satisfies me that Facebook and Twitter are taking this on in a way that's yet responsible enough. And it has to be addressed, because it is now playing out in a very, specifically dangerous way, as it's played into vaccine hesitancy, where people are not trusting that the vaccine is a good thing, and that it's something that you should plan to get, and just accept it and realize how it's going to get us out of the ditch that we're in. So that's a major, overlapping policy issue that needs to go beyond just the restatement of the problem and the swirl and the churn. We need to, again, find out the way to translate that into real people's lives. And it needs to happen in Spanish as urgently as in English.
Agree. And in both our countries. I think here in Mexico, we do also have, a huge sector of our population that is distrustful of, obviously, traditional medicine, vaccinations, government. So it will be important, I think, in both of our countries all across, to have that campaign where, vaccination is what will save your life and what will let you go back to a normalcy of some sorts eventually. So, if there's no other questions, I can't thank you both, Heidi, Michelle. This has really been fantastic. It has been interesting. It has, opened our eyes. And I think that this is the beginning of a new era. It's the dawn of a new era for many of us. I think we will remember this month, January 2021, I'm sorry. A lot of us, our grandchildren will study it in history books. We'll remember it for so many things, the way our parents told us stories of momentous events when they grew up. I think we will be telling our grandchildren about this month. So thank you for sharing your knowledge and your time and your experience with us.
3 Wednesdays in January. That's really the headline. The Wednesday of the insurrection, the Wednesday of the second impeachment led by Jamie Raskin of Maryland, and the Wednesday the 20th when the inauguration and new team, new president, vice president, and Congress there observing it and participating in it when that happened.
Yeah, it really is. It really, we hope that next Wednesday will be a boring, calm day with nothing.
Yes.
It's the Holocaust Remembrance Day, so we hope that it will be a solemn day.
Yes.
And we won't have anything to make it a fourth Wednesday. But thank you. I don't know if anyone has anything to add. Mario, thank you so much for organizing this. It really has been one of my favorite, if not my favorite, session that we've had since the pandemic started. And we've had many. This one has definitely been my favorite. So thank you to all of us for joining. And thank you, Heidi and Michelle. We hope to see you again sometime in a couple of months so that we can sort of, look upon what the first 100 days were. So I'd love to have you back after the 100 days and we can rehash what was promised, what was achieved, and how we see our country developing.
Sounds good. And by that point, Biden and AMLO will have had multiple phone calls.
Exactly.
We'll have to figure out what they like to talk about in common. If it's food, if it's sport, if it's music, if it's, I don't know.
Baseball.
Yes, and we lost Hank Aaron today. Hank Aaron died today, which is all these giants have left us in the past number of months. Yeah, may he rest in peace. Thank you so much. Thank you for having us.
Thank you guys.
Thank you so much.
Great conversation. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, everyone.
Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.
It was
Thank you so much for everything.
So looking forward. Yes.